people, by definition, can't negotiate for a long time because the clock is ticking and pretty soon there'll be nothing for them to negotiate with. So the very fact they are terminally ill means they're running out of time, so they cannot afford to string out the negotiating process.
He has been selected as the chief adjudicator of the World Universities Debating Championships 2018, the world's largest debating competition that draws more than 1,200 contestants from 70 countries.
Good evening, my name is Michael Dunn Goekjian and I'll be adjudicating this debate today.
He is always ready to share his expertise with any debating team that seeks his advice. Today on Heart to Heart, the chief adjudicator of the World Debating Championship and renowned debate coach, Michael Dunn Goekjian.
Thank you very much.
Well, Michael, welcome to Heart. Thank you so much for joining us today. Would you first of all like to say hello to our viewers that are watching today's Heart to Heart?
Hello, my name is Michael Dunn Goekjian and I'm an enthusiast for all things debate related. I'm a competitive debater, I'm a former world number one and a current European champion. I'm also a judge and I'm the chief adjudicator for the upcoming World Championships. And finally, I'm a trainer and have trained a number of national teams.
Wow, that sounds very exciting. Sounds like a very difficult job. So once again, despite your very busy schedule, thank you so much for joining us on our show today. What brings you to Korea this time around?
So I actually came to Korea to film a debate show here on Arirang. So yes. I was one of the judges on Intelligence High School Debate, which is a show that pits high school students from Korea against one another in a debating contest. It was great fun, and to be honest, I'd never seen a show like this before. So it was really wonderful to see the kids getting engaged and, you know, as time went on, developing their proficiency and enthusiasm for debate.
Hello and welcome to Intelligence High School Debate. Time now to meet our three adjudicators. Michael Dunn Goekjian, former #1 ranked speaker of the World Universities Debating Championships.
The enactment of a Good Samaritan law.
This law shouldn't be enacted and advocates that the law will ultimately
the civilians, not the government force themselves.
First of all, we believe that the Good Samaritan law is going against the spirit of law in our society. Secondly,
Sorry, ma'am.
Yes, sir?
Surely calling an ambulance is an act that a child can do, and we believe that does not require professional learning.
There are other situations. We have agreed that calling an ambulance, if it is established as a law and people follow it by the right process, it will certainly be settled as common sense in our society in the long run.
To propose the motion, this House supports the enactment of a Good Samaritan law.
That not helping leads to killing.
Opening opposition want to talk about the very real practical difficulties of implementing this legislation. But to a certain extent, neither team truly wants to go into the home turf of the other team. So the opening government are not super keen to talk about practicalities unless they're saying, oh look, it doesn't really matter that much. And the opening opposition are not super keen on talking about morality except when they're saying, well look, we agree with you that it's moral, we just think there's a better way of doing it. So I think both teams would benefit from going for the jugular and really attacking the other team's home turf in addition to defending their own. This was actually the one used on the Intelligence High School Debate programme on Arirang, is called British Parliamentary. So for British Parliamentary debate, you have 4 teams of 2 people each, 2 on each side. There's an opening proposition in favour of the motion, a closing proposition in favour of the motion, an opening opposition against the motion, and a closing opposition against the motion. And what that means is you're not just trying to win for your side, you're trying to win for your individual team. So you're not just trying to give a case for your side, you're trying to give the best case possible for your side, because you know that other team that comes after you or comes before you will otherwise just do a better job and will take first place. So there's a real incentive to be as creative as possible in providing the very best arguments for your side, which I think is a uniqueness of the format. The second thing is, as you've alluded to, you don't get a whole lot of time to prepare. You actually get 15 minutes, and you're not allowed to use the internet, and the topic can really be anything, and your side is pre-assigned. So that means that it's incumbent upon you to have a real broad knowledge of different topics that can come up, and a real open-mindedness and intellectual flexibility to argue in favor of positions that you might not necessarily agree with yourself. And I think that creates not just public speaking skills, but also a general open-mindedness and sense of perspective, which I think is very useful in life. The ability to recognize that there are two sides to each issue and to be able to defend the position of your opponent.
Now, you are the chief adjudicator of the World Universities Debating Championships. So could you maybe tell us about the championships?
Sure. So the World Universities Debating Championships is the world's largest debate competition. It features participants from approximately 70 countries, 400 teams from 400 universities around the world, and 400 judges on top. So total participant numbers, about 1,200, making it, I think, the largest student-organized student event in the world. So it's a pretty hefty undertaking. It moves every year from country to country, which is quite fun. So last year it was in the Netherlands. This coming year it'll be in Mexico. The year after that in Cape Town, South Africa.
Oh, okay. So you obviously must have huge responsibilities, not only as the chief adjudicator, but also as one of the judges of the world's largest debate competition. Now, what do you judge the competitors on? I mean, judges must have, all different things that they focus on. So what do the judges mostly pay attention to the most, and what do you focus on when it comes to judging the competitors?
Sure. Well, I guess I'll caveat all of this by saying it's tremendously subjective. What is persuasive, what is a good argument, is something that, varies from place to place and has certainly varied over time. I think what I'm looking for is really a holistic sense of persuasiveness. So there's a school of thought that says, look, when we think about persuasion, we can break it down. There's a component that's attributable to the style in which you speak. There's a component that's attributable to your content. And there's a component that really reflects your strategy, the degree to which you're responding and engaging with the other side. And to my mind, all of these things are important, but you can't really separate them out. At the end of the day, if I'm trying to persuade someone of something, the question they're going to be asking themselves is, do I believe what I'm being told? Does the argument make sense given the justification provided? So I try to adjudicate a debate based on the arguments that are being made. And of course, how those arguments are delivered, the extent to which they respond to what the other side is saying, the quality of the content matters. But in reality, it's whether you're persuaded of the claim being made that I think is most important. A difficult pitfall, I think, when judging is trying to prevent your own biases from creeping in. I think as a debater, it's very easy to form an awful lot of opinions.
Yes.
But when you're adjudicating, you really can't let those opinions interfere with the task at hand, which is assessing from the perspective of a neutral observer who's winning the debate, not from the perspective of someone who's very biased and has an awful lot of views who's best appealing to my sensibilities.
Right, but it takes some practice, though. You can't just, I guess, I'm sure it takes some practice to kind of not focus on certain things, I guess, not pay too much attention to certain things and try to be neutral, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wouldn't claim to have mastered it by any stretch of the imagination. It's something that I think takes an awful lot of time to develop, and I think you have to be quite introspective about thinking about your judgments and thinking about where potentially you might have overthought something or perhaps underanalyzed what was being said or let some of your own views creep in. So it's a learning process, certainly.
Michael is not only the former best speaker in the world and upcoming chief adjudicator at the World Universities Debating Championships, but he's also a very multi-talented individual, not just in debate, but also in pretty much everything that he does. He's wonderful at the job that he is working at. He's also someone who constantly challenges himself to get better, even in areas where he's maybe not naturally talented. So a very gifted and challenging individual in that way.
Hello, Mr. Michael Dunn. It was a great privilege and pleasure for me to meet you, albeit briefly. And I will remember for a long time all the great conversation we had over lunch. I was very impressed by your passion for debate and for your general erudition. And I remember those short conversations for a long time, and I hope to see you soon, either in Seoul or in London.
I talked to many of the students that participated in the debate tournament, and they unanimously tell me that getting personal feedback from you, one of the world's greatest debaters, made the intelligence experience all the more enjoyable and valuable. So thank you for that. And for me as well, it was a great pleasure getting to know you, talking to you over dinner, and introducing you to the joys of Hanu and Samgyeopsal. So Michael, stay safe. All the best for the training, for that marathon, and hopefully I'll get to see you soon. Bye for now.
I understand that you majored in mathematics, so you were an excellent student in math, of course, obviously. But what got you to start debating? How did it all begin for you?
So at the University Debating Society, I came along just for a first debate to try it out. It was a big debate. Everyone was wearing black tie. There were a bunch of politicians who had come along to speak alongside some of the students. And the thing that really struck me sitting at the back of that auditorium was the tremendous clarity, creativity, but also the amazing confidence and sense of personality and self that the speakers up at the front of the room had. And I thought to myself, if I can get just 10% of that confidence and that creativity that those guys have, then I think I'll be very happy. So it was really seeing the end product and believing that it could be pretty transformational for me, and deciding to work towards that from, not from a position of any great skill or natural ability, towards that conclusion. There are an awful lot of videos of debates online, and I watched one of the videos of the World Championships final that really struck me. It was this opening, it was a debate about supporting nationalism. And one of the speakers in opposition opened up with just this really memorable line that grabbed my attention. He said, opening government want you to believe that nationalism is great. They want you to celebrate Barack Obama saying there's not a black America or white America, there's the United States of America. Opening opposition wished he'd used more cosmopolitan rhetoric. But at closing opposition, we'd just rather he didn't lie. Because when it comes to getting a job, or your chance of getting frisked by police, or your ability to go to college or join the political elite of your nation, there is a black America and a white America. And I just thought, irrespective of whether you agree with the argument, that was a tremendous piece of self-expression, tremendous rhetoric, really imaginative, and showing such personality and individuality in the way he expressed himself. And that from someone who can't have been much older than, 20 years old. And I think just hearing that and seeing someone do that impromptu, completely off the cuff, was a real inspiration to me. And I think that was when I decided, I'm going to give this a try, see how it goes.
So that experience just kind of really sparked your passion for debating. Now, of course, now you're actively working as a debate judge and coach, but there's always a first time for everyone. So let's talk about the very first time, or your very first competition, debate competition. What was it like? How did you feel? What did it feel like to be competing in a debate competition? Was it good or bad? Were you good or bad? How was it?
Oh, well, I think it was awful. I'd had a week to prepare, which is, usually I get 15 minutes, so it was a very long time. It was about making voting compulsory. We researched it very thoroughly. We spent a lot of time writing out what we were going to say. And it was my turn to speak. And there were 10 people in the room, of whom 6 were debating. So really only 4 audience members. I got up. I straightened my papers on the table. I cleared my throat. I opened my mouth and I wet myself. And it was awful. It was absolutely awful. I felt so humiliated. I'd never felt so humiliated in my life. And I sat back down, and that was it. But afterwards, reflecting, I thought to myself, well, at the very least, it can't get any worse.
I see.
It's only uphill from here. I think once you've understood that in public speaking, at the end of the day, the worst thing that can happen is you give a bad speech, and people go away, and they go back to their lives, and they forget. Once you've realized that, a lot of the fear factor just goes away. So the next time I actually said something, and a couple of times after that, I even won my first debate. So it really was all uphill from me.
Why do we care about government debt? Why? Because actually, the continued existence of humanity, the notion that our children might be able to have a life, came together to fight for the right to build a state of their own design. Look, at the end of this debate, we prevent harm to future victims. That is the most important thing. Proud to stand in opposition. Fast-dominated system. Does that mean that there are no vestiges of it left? Absolutely not. But it has weakened materially. Brian? And today I want to take a little bit of time to explore the concept of framing and to explain why it is that I think it's so important. So, to start with, what do I mean by framing? I think lots of people mean different things by this word. The definition I want to use is framing is the process of explaining why it is that an argument matters in the context of the debate in question.
So I understand that you've won numerous awards at various debate competitions, contests across the world. Is there an award that you think is, I guess, most memorable or most important to you, that has the biggest meaning to you?
I think in 2016 I was world #1, best speaker at the World Universities Debating Championships. I think that has to mean the most to me. I didn't expect to be world #1. I was tremendously pleased, and it really represented for me the culmination of several years of, I think, quite hefty focus on improving my debating and improving my competitive performance. I guess the other that would mean a great deal was winning the European Championships, currently European champion. There, my partner, actually, English was not his first language. He's from Serbia. And I think it meant a great deal for both of us that he was able to be the first English as a second language European champion. I think coming from Serbia, people often judge you on the basis of your accent. They often ignore what you say because they find the way you pronounce words difficult or funny. So to overcome that barrier and become the champion of Europe, I think meant a great deal to him, but also to me to have been a part of that.
Yes. Wonderful. Now, you're also recognized as a debate coach, right? So you do coach national teams. You train national teams from the UK, India, Singapore, the Philippines, and Bangladesh, probably just a few, right? And there are more teams that you've trained. Do these national teams have their own characteristics? How are they each different?
Absolutely. I think there's an awful lot of variation. Obviously, I wouldn't want to generalize, and I think a team is only comprised of the students within it. With that said, I think you see tremendous variation in the style with which people speak. Some teams like to speak very quickly. Team Bangladesh, for example, I think has a tendency to talk very fast. A lot of teams, by contrast, speak very slowly, like to pepper what they say with jokes, try to focus a lot on their style. Team England's a good example of that. I think the biggest difference, though, is in the perspectives that people bring to debate. So one thing that I've observed in Europe, for example, is I set the topic, this House believes that Putin has been good for Russia. And I think for Europeans, that's quite a hard proposition to defend. There's widespread negative press coverage of Russia, of the sanctions that are hitting it, of some of the recent geopolitical events that have involved Russia. And so people find it very hard, I think, to defend Vladimir Putin's legacy. By contrast, when I set that topic in a lot of other countries, for example in India, people actually find the proposition quite easy to defend. They think that Putin has brought pride to Russia, that he's in many ways restored some of the national purpose that might have felt lost after the fall of the Soviet Union. And I think that contrast says something about the different perspectives that you get on world affairs living in different countries, the different views that are pushed in the media and in politics. So that's often the most interesting thing, traveling to different places and seeing how people from very different cultures, very different political contexts approach world issues.
I see. So, Michael, how do you train your teams? For example, have you developed your own program? Do you have your own techniques or your favorite exercises that you like to, I guess, educate your team members or train them?
Well, I certainly have a favorite exercise, and I try to do this at every workshop that I run. It starts with the observation that I think a huge proportion of what people say is actually wasted words, fillers like repeating yourself with slightly different words, etc. So what this exercise does is it asks you to make an argument, can be an argument for anything, in 1 minute. No less, no more. Then we repeat, this time with 30 seconds. And then we repeat again, this time with 15 seconds. So what it's asking you to do is appreciate what it is that you're saying that is essential and what it is that you're saying that is ultimately filler. And then I like to ask participants, which version do you think was the best? And almost always it's the 30-second version, which I think serves to illustrate this point that about 50% of what people say is typically ultimately unnecessary.
I see. That's very interesting. Yeah. It's very interesting. Now, what kinds of efforts have you made to become so successful or to become such a great debater? I mean, can you maybe give us some tips as to how to become a good speaker, what someone needs in order to become a good speaker or debater?
Sure. So I think, for me, the biggest way that I improved was through practice. I think, that's something that's not unique to debate by any stretch of the imagination, whether you're doing running, whether you're playing tiddlywinks. The reality is practice makes perfect. So every morning I would get up, I would take 15 minutes to think of an argument, and then I would give a little speech in front of the mirror. And then I would ask myself, what did I do well, what did I do badly? And then I would do it again, trying to bear in mind that feedback I had given myself. And gradually, over the course of 365 speeches a year, I think I was able to see a pretty consistent rate of improvement. In terms of tips for improving speaking, I think all of us, when we're nervous, try to speak incredibly quickly to get it over with. And I think by and large that's a mistake. The biggest thing one can do to improve one's speaking is just slow down. People lose their train of thought, they lose coherency, not because they don't know what to say, but because they're not giving themselves the time to think ahead to the next sentence.
I see.
So taking pauses, speaking slowly, using punctuation to give yourself a moment to think and breathe. I think that's often the biggest thing that people get wrong and the biggest thing that I suggest that people do.
Okay.
But I think the biggest piece of advice I can give, and the one that brings with it the biggest return, is really just to keep trying. It's very easy when you're doing public speaking to feel humiliated. We all have our sense of pride and decide to quit or to do a little bit less because you're worried that you're not doing the best you can. That is the moment when you need to try as hard as you possibly can, put in the most effort, because that is the moment when you'll see the greatest return. So just keep trying, feel positive, and remember that public speaking at the end of the day is just a conversation multiplied by many people. It's no different from talking in a pair.
We're finally down to our final question, our last question for today's show. Tell us about your future goals, your future plans, goals.
So over the next couple of years, I'm trying to do as much as I can to spread debating to more and more places and help more and more teams achieve what they want to. So this year, in December, I'm going to Mexico to be chief adjudicator of the World Championships, the first time it's ever taken place in Latin America.
Oh, I see.
So we're tremendously excited about that, and we're hoping to bring participants the best experience yet. And then in 2 years, hopefully, I'll also be part of the adjudication team for the 40th World Championships in Thailand, which we're tremendously excited about. And the hope is that as we approach our 4th decade, we can really pull out all the stops and do something exceptional to bring the World Championships to a new level, invite more and more teams. At the moment we're at 400, maybe we can get to 500, and spread debating as far as we possibly can. And in the interim, I'll be traveling around doing as much coaching as I possibly can. Over the last year, I think I've been to 20 different countries coaching or participating in debate. And the hope is that that will be able to continue.
Well, it sure sounds like a very busy schedule, but exciting as well. I wish you the best and best of luck in the championships that will be held in December in Mexico. And please do continue to spread debating across the world. I thank you so much for your time, and it was a wonderful time. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
we're done. You can drink water. Is there something you might have missed or left out?
I don't think there was anything we missed. I think we got through everything, no?
Great.
And you even got through the extra questions, I think, as well. So.
Yeah, so they'll probably just edit it, throw in the question about the 15-minute preparation time,
Yeah.
and that you get